Norman Frajman, with his Paul Harris Fellow from the Rotary Club of Boca Raton Sunrise. Norman, congratulations. It's really nice to be here with Bogdan and Ed Rowan, who's taking the photograph there, and your family. So
well, I can only answer that I am greatly honored, and I'm so pleased of your presence here that at least, you know, that our historical events are not in vain, that we're being recognized still as to what has happened during the greatest tragedy known to mankind. And as long as we have people such as you are, our memories are going to remain, and the young generation will most likely know and learn what hatred and disadvantage of other people means.
Thank
I
you.
hope they take heed, because we must tell them that history is capable of repetition, and I want to leave a much better world for my grandchildren than I had and that you nice people have. And thanks to organizations such as yours, I know that we are going to achieve it.
And Bogdan's holding a jacket that Norman wants to talk about. Please go ahead, Norman, talk.
Well, as you probably know, I am a Holocaust survivor, and to say it in a few words, what makes me a Holocaust, what gives me the right to call myself as such, is the fact that I spent almost 2 years in the Warsaw Ghetto, and I was present during the heroic Jewish uprising within the Warsaw Ghetto that took place on April the 19th of 1943. Outside of the ghetto, they have a carousel playing like as if nothing has happened. And the ghetto was liquidated, people were killed by the dozens. So this is a very historical painting. From there, I was shipped to one of the 6 extermination camps that was designated specifically for murdering Jewish people. And that camp was called Majdanek. And for the grace of God, I survived that camp, which is a miracle. If people ask me, how did I survive? It is not on my wits, nor is it on my being stronger than the next person, nor definitely not wiser. It was just an act of providence that made me survive this hellish place called Majdanek. I would urge anyone who listens to this to open up their Wikipedia on a computer and go to November the 3rd of 1943, where the Germans designated a code name called Erntefest. Translated, it means Harvest Festival. And this was one of the worst days in the history of the Holocaust, where 43,000 people were slaughtered, and within November 3rd and 4th, liquidating many camps surrounding Majdanek. I was by then shipped out several weeks ago. Before that, I was shipped out to one of the ammunition factories in Skarzysko, where I was till 1944, and from there, as the Allies were approaching, I was transferred to another camp called Buchenwald, that's in the heart of Germany, and there I was given this jacket in 1943, I believe it was the 1944, and I believe the month was August, if I remember correctly. From there, from Buchenwald, I was taken to a camp called Schlieben, where we manufactured bazookas for the German armed forces. And from there, after the Allies were much closer, the Russians were coming on, we were taken onto a death march. And I was liberated out of a death march on May the 8th of 1945, which was the very, very end day of the war, of the Second World War. And my friends, here I am with one thing that, thank God that I survived, but I owe a debt to the ones whose voices have been silenced. And this is what I've been doing ever since my liberation. I'm going to schools and sharing my experiences with the young people in order for this tragedy not repeat itself.
So I have a couple of questions. Can I ask you a few questions?
Of course, of course.
So first of all, let's tell everyone, how old were you when you entered the camps, and how old were you when you left the camp?
Well, when I came in, I was born in 1929, which in 10 years after my birth, the war started. And I believe September the 1st of 1939. And I was 10 years old. And I was born of all the days on 9/11, as if I didn't have enough problems.
So you were born on the 11th of September 1929.
That's correct. Now, I was liberated in 1945. So I was not quite 16. I was in the upper 15s. This is the history of my survival.
Right.
You know, there are a lot of people, there are all different means that people survive. By partisans, by being rescued on the right by the righteous Gentiles who risk their lives to save a human life. And you ask them, why did they do it? The answer is because it was the right thing to do.
Fantastic.
And
when you entered the camps, did you have any siblings with you that your family? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, my family, I was separated from my father. That's another story. We ran away from the city of Warsaw. That's the city of my birth. And we evacuated the city, winding up in the Ukraine part of Poland. And from there, we stayed. We wintered through, and we received some very good reports that Warsaw is fine, that the Germans don't bother anyone. Nobody knew about it yet. And everyone had the German of the First World War on their mind, not knowing what they go. So my dad, in all his wisdom, said, why should we be refugees? Let's go back home. Because according to us, the war could not last more than a month or two, and Poland would be victorious.
Right.
Which was nonsense, because in comes a very organized, motorized army, and the Polish army was still fighting with horse and wagons. So we were stopped at the border Poland was divided. The western part was given to the German forces, and the eastern part to the Russians. And it was a border fence, which, in order for us to go back to Warsaw, we had to smuggle, being caught by the Russian border guards, put into a makeshift jail, and after like 3-4 days, they took my dad out. And when I did not see my father as of that night for 22 years.
How old was your father when that happened? Do you remember?
Well, must have been in the upper 30s.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And now, my dad survived the war in Siberia. He was sentenced because he dared cross the border and
Right.
he was a political prisoner, whatever. Anyway, I did not see. I did communicate with him after the war ended. Our lines crossed. I came to the United States. He settled in Israel. And I didn't see him, as I mentioned, in 22 years. And then I was already married with one child. We decided to bring our father here to be reunited.
How did you get to the United States? How did that happen? Explain to the audience.
I
how that
originally, my original destination was to go to Israel.
happened. Okay.
But I don't know if you heard the meaning of DP, which means Displaced Persons Camp. They were all over Germany, Italy, and France. And they were sponsored by an international organization, the UNRWA. And I was in one of those, and I put an ad in one of the inter-camp newspapers asking about an uncle whom I had in the United States. And sure enough, my aunt's cousin answered that they're alive and gave me the address.
Where were they from?
They were here already in the United
But
States.
what part of the United States? In New York?
In New York.
In New York. Okay.
Now, what has happened then, I must mention that my uncle came into the United States during the war. I believe a person by the name of Sugihara was the one who signed his visa, and he came with his son, my cousin Mark, who, by entering the United States, he enlisted in the U.S. Army, and he was killed in Anzio, in Italy, during the Second World War.
Second World War, yeah.
So when I heard that, as I mentioned to you, my destination was to go to Israel, but there was still a family tie between my uncle and I thought maybe my presence here will ease his pain of losing his son. It was not so. You can never replace a love of a father. But nevertheless, he was kind enough to send me papers, and I arrived here in 1948 to the United States, and the rest is like history.
So you spent most of your time in New York once you arrived here in the United
Yes,
States?
but I want you to know I came here without the knowledge of language. I'm multilingual. I speak 5 of them now, and one of them is English, which was foreign to me completely. And, it's all different stages of survival within the United States.
Sure.
You have to learn a new history.
And you met your wife in New York?
I met my wife, yes. I went on vacation one time, went to the Catskills in New York, to the mountains, and this kind lady was there. And I met my dear wife, Shelley, and I am married now 65 years to that.